Are mRNA vaccines in live animals a vital tool for preventing disease, or a potential threat to animal and human welfare? Join us as we explore both sides of this contentious issue, examining the evidence and uncovering the facts.
We've handed over our food security to someone else, and they're here to help you take it back. It's the Farm2Table Direct Show with Ryan and Keith.
This is Keith with the Farm2Table Direct Show, and across the way over here is my brother Ryan.
Hey everybody.
And my son Josh is also in the house today. So, vaccine or menace? That is the question. And we're going to explore the controversy of mRNA vaccines in live animals. And we're going to take basically both sides of the argument. We're going to try to, we all have our own opinions about, what's going on, but, we don't want to inject so much of our own opinion in what's going on this. This is not an opinion piece. This is more or less a fact-based program that we're going to try to run today. We're going to give you both sides of the argument and then kind of give our solution to the whole thing. And
Right. Well, rumors have been circulating about the mRNA vaccines in the livestock, and fact checkers have been scoffing, but what's really going on?
Right.
Could we be eating animals that have been treated with mRNA? How do we know what's in the meat at our grocery store?
right,
And what really this has been going on for a while, but what really kind of kicked this off as a hot issue recently, Tom Renz shot out a tweet that was USA Today. Facebook fact check confirms mRNA in the food supply, quoting, while mRNA vaccines have been licensed for pigs, cats, and dogs. Also states our fact check work is supported in part by Facebook. That's irrelevant. This tweet came out, and it was in reference to the Missouri House Bill 1169, which was, was going to force them to label. Force producers to label whether it had potential gene therapy product. And he was in support of that bill and kind of launched that off, kind of brought highlight to it, and it really kind of lit a fire for the last month or so.
right.
On
But
social and everywhere else.
But this controversy has been going on for longer than that. That's just kind of this.
That's the most
latest.
most recent thing. Yeah, it's been something they've been working on for in excess of a decade.
Right.
Maybe 2 decades now.
Right. So what are some of the proponents saying about the mRNA vaccine in our food supply? Now, the most recent thing that's come out, I guess, is talking about in our cattle.
Right.
But there's more to consider than just our cattle. But anyway, the proponents for vaccines, mRNA vaccines, kind of where are they at on this?
Well, one day, of course, all the wagons were circled, and all the experts, including from the USDA down to whoever, all came out, kind of refuting what was being put out. This rumor that there was a requirement or a mandate, and they're saying that there's not a mandate for producers to vaccinate. And it was a personal and business decision left up to the producers. That was from Marissa Perry at the USDA. But there's a professor, let me find his name, Dr. Kevin Volta. He's a molecular biologist and professor at the University of Florida. Mm-hmm. And his name's popped up on quite a few of the things that are out there on the internet. And said that in a recent he's, basically that they were introduced through the COVID vaccine, but have been in development for decades. Technology's potential, this is his quote, potential in human health makes it likely candidate to have a place in animal health as well. However, the technology is being maligned in social media and now shaping decisions at the state level of state legislature. So yeah, it's, he's big at it. He researches it, obviously, and his thing is it's not in your food. It's a vaccine for the animal that, just like any vaccine, protects the animal from disease. And it is currently being used in swine or pigs. And so in the absence of the virus, it's kind of like giving the virus to the body a wanted poster, he says. But they're basically claiming that it's harmless, that it helps the animal, but that it won't. There's not enough there to make it to us. and
Right.
that, it can help treat them for respiratory diseases and things of that nature that.
So let's just talk, a little bit about, first of all, what is mRNA vaccines for animals? For example, are they different in humans than they are in animals? Or what kind of, what's the definition for mRNA?
Well, just Wikipedia, it's a vaccine that uses a copy of a molecule. It's called a messenger RNA to produce an immune response. Basically, it's a code. It's an instruction book, and Josh can kind of break down a little bit more about the proteins and some of that stuff. I know it's
mRNA vaccines, in layman's terms, it's like the computer coding for DNA. That's probably a simple way of trying to explain that. The difference between the COVID mRNA vaccines versus the mRNA that they've been researching for 30 years now is that it uses a full-length spike protein in its system, and which hasn't been done before. They usually use what's called a partial protein in the system because they had worries that a full-size protein could have serious side effects, such as the ability for DNA to repair itself, might be it's the word I'm looking for. It might not be able to repair itself, in other words.
I see.
So they've been doing studies on that recently. The simple answer is they just don't know yet.
Right. One of the questions that I had about it is, well, is it actually changing their DNA structure? And we can get into the, the ethical, the moral aspect of that, another time. But that was one of the questions I had, and I'm sure that other people would have it too.
Right. Well, I know what I was reading. The proponents, of course, are the people who think it's, the science people, the people that think it's safe.
Right.
If they say no, it doesn't. And then on the extreme, on the other end, there are those who say it does. So, I think really we don't have any proof, you might say, yet.
Right.
Because there's just not been enough released information. That's the one thing about animal vaccines versus human vaccines is the reportability and stuff is different. It's not at the same criteria, you might say. They don't, we want to know, people want to know everything going on with what's going on in them, but they'll forget about their food. And
Right. Right. Over the years, I've picked up on people that talk about basically you are what you eat.
Right.
And they seem to be more on one side of the political spectrum than the other. Not even going to go further than that, other than to say that they were very much proponents and don't vaccine, don't do what are some of the other things that they inject cattle with
Antibiotics,
steroids,
and
all of that
things.
stuff. So they were proponents against that.
Right.
But it seems to me now that there's either a balance, on both sides of the political spectrum, of pros and cons, people who are on both sides of it,
Right.
or a flip.
Well, a funny thing is, in some of the reading that I was doing about the Missouri House bill, was that surprisingly there were a lot of people who were what would traditionally be considered on the conservative side of things, and even the Chamber of Commerce's and the Catalyst, different ones who were opposed to this bill.
Right.
And the reason they said they were opposed to it was because the writing was so vague that it could force all kinds of stuff to be labeled as genetic, modified, or possibly gene stuff that really wasn't. It's just because it had the right wording or it did this or the other, and they were just saying it was too vague of a writing on the legislature.
Right.
But it was surprisingly, there was opposition coming from both sides and there was support coming from both sides. So it just depended on,
that's interesting.
what a person's personal, it was labeled as potential gene therapy product. That's
Yeah,
what they're.
yeah, we do see this flip. I mean, like you said, one side of the political aisle are the ones who really fought to have like chicken labeled with antibiotics on their
Right.
packages. And it seems like the same people that fought for that, which I see as a good thing,
Right.
now they're kind of just, it doesn't really matter so much if it's, not labeled to have, a vaccine in your beef or something like that. And
Right.
I mean, it's strange. It really is.
Right. So, whenever I was looking over this and first heard about it, I was thinking, okay, A, is it happening?
Right.
And then B, if it is happening, is it harmful to humans? Those were, two of my considerations. Now, as far as getting into, whether or not it is happening.
Well, I mean, they're saying that basically that on pork, it's been since 2018. They've been using mRNA type products now.
Now who is they?
Well,
who's saying that?
Individual farms or corporate farms, whatever,
Okay.
in the business. The one thing is it is somewhat, how should we say, each company or each person's kind of choice. It's not a mandate. It's,
Right.
And Merck's Sequivity is what this says, the platform, to provide it, to try to kill swine flu. And I know chickens, they've done certain limited types of vaccines under limited circumstances to try to get rid of the avian flu, bird flu,
Right, yeah.
and those types of things. So it is, it's out there. It is happening. It's just a matter of to what level. And beef is not yet. That's the best way to put it.
That we know of.
That we know of. Well, okay, it's not.
We've talked
Right.
about before that much of what is labeled U.S. beef is really from Brazil. They
Right.
raise the
Right.
cattle in Brazil
Right.
and
Finish
then
it
they
in
finish
Mexico.
it. Yeah, finish
Right.
it
And then
in
it comes
Mexico
up
and
here.
then here, and then they can slap a U.S. sticker on
Right.
it. And
Right.
So we don't know the legislation and what they're doing in other countries.
Right.
'Cause-
More importantly, we do not know, which type of grass it was fed. We do not know, what kind of grains it was fed. We don't know how many injections
Right.
that have gone into the cattle. Because once it gets to,
Right.
the United States, they basically they slaughter it
Right.
and process it, and then they slap the
It
stickers.
says product of the U.S.
And it says product of the U.S. when nothing could be further from the truth.
Right. It's and that was one of the people who were proponents of the House bill up in Missouri. That was one of their big things was the shadowing or the misleading of the labels and stuff. They felt was a big issue.
Right.
That consumers should have the right to know what is in it and make the decision for themselves if they're going to go forward or not, and let the market kind of decide.
Right.
What was going to happen there. Now I want to clip back up for just a second. When I was talking about the chickens, they're not using mRNA right now. They're just using RNA vaccine. But there is a lot of interest in developing that for poultry.
Right.
So and a lot of money from the pharmaceuticals, in that direction.
Right.
And like I said, it's beef. Like I said, they've just came out and said there's no current mRNA vaccines licensed for use in beef cattle in the U.S. So,
Right. Yeah. Now that was something that I also picked up on something that was called fact or check your fact, I should say.
Right.
And the original was a post shared on Instagram purports cows are receiving an mRNA vaccine which would pass to humans via dairy products, including milk and cheese. Now that's, that was
Right. And
what
that's-
this Instagram was about. But the verdict on it was this is false.
Right.
And what it says here is the claim is false. A spokesperson for the U.S. Department of Agriculture stated no such technology is licensed
Right.
for livestock.
Right. Doesn't say it doesn't exist. Doesn't
That's
say they're
right.
not working on it.
That's
just that it's not licensed, which is, if you want to say legal jargon, but it's basically saying that if they're using it, it's probably in trial period, I think it's what they're trying to get at, but, or infer from that, but, because,
Right.
I mean, at least, you go down and talk to the local farmer, they're not too fond about putting stuff into their cattle that they don't know what it is.
Right.
Whereas maybe, a corporate, entity may have a different set of standards. And some of the critics about cattlemen saying that they don't vaccinate, they don't do these things, say that, well, yeah, but once it leaves that cattle ranch and it goes to feedlots, sale-barn feedlots and finishing, 2 or 3 different people handle that cow. So what happens between the time it leaves that rancher and the time it goes to the through the
Right.
processing to end up on the grocery store shelf?
Right. Yeah, well, we've got a solution toward the end of this that'll kind of deal with that aspect
Absolutely.
of it. But there was also something else to kind of put a finer point on it is, are they doing it or are they not going to do it in cattle? And I mean, just looking at it, I mean, why would you be experimenting unless you had, that particular plan? And
Right.
and I'm going to go back to 2021,
Right.
and let's see here. All right, so this was from this is on the USDA.gov website.
Okay.
And they wanted to start, and it's from Iowa State University submitting this to the USDA, I assume. And it was the novel mRNA vaccine technology for prevention of bovine respiratory, and I'm not even going to try that, but it's RSV for short. It's a virus, but
Right.
but anyway, and it was proposed to have a start date that the project would start on October 1st, 2021.
Right.
Okay, so this is not something that people, are just panicking for no reason. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not based in, oh, this is a conspiracy theory to say that they're experimenting with it in our livestock, because this was from the Iowa
Right.
State University that wanted to do that.
Right.
And I'll just read this part right here. It says, here we will test a novel mRNA vaccine system we have developed that substantially lowers the price point for production. And we're going to get back to that, but price point in production animals, and may lead to more thermal stable transcripts compatible with vaccinating on the farm. Now, when I said that, that we would get back to it, because there are points of contention that we're about to get into,
Right.
that to where, the price point may not be the real, true, genuine purpose for it,
Right. I mean, to add on to what you're saying, I mean, you went back to 2021 and
Right.
and Iowa up there and that in bovine. We've talked about poultry and we've talked about pork and we've talked about, cattle or bovine. But here's the thing. Same year, 2021, University of California, Riverside we're studying whether they could turn edible plants like lettuce into mRNA vaccine factories. So,
Wow.
so they were looking at the possibility of using that, to put into plants that we could eat, and there would be enough of it if you ate enough of it that it would put a vaccine of some kind,
Right.
Now they were, of course, 2021's post-COVID, so they were, looking at the technology that was used in COVID vaccines is the way they put it, and so, National Science Foundation gave them a grant, and they're looking at being able to replicate that into enough mRNA to rival a traditional shot, and finally determining the right dosage. So, and they said ideally a single plant would produce enough mRNA to vaccinate a single person. That was an associate professor, Juan Pablo Geraldo, so I mean, they were testing it with spinach and lettuce, and have long-term goals of people growing it in their own gardens.
Right.
So,
Now, science can be a good thing.
Right.
And I'm not even saying that that there might be some good benefits, from, the human race being vaccinated from certain things. Certainly, I've not been an anti-vaxxer when it came to, certain things like polio, right, and that sort of thing, and it never affected me,
Well,
but
they took them like 7 years to develop that. Now, people could say, well, that was way back then, and technology's advanced, and so on and so forth. But, all the way up until recently, our vaccines took time, and they went through trials, and they went through studies, and they went through a lot of things.
Right.
And people say, well, with technology, mRNA, they don't have to do it as long because, it's being done basically in a lab, and it's not having to be a live specimen they can replicate, and they say it's faster, it's safer, but
these are people who obviously never watched one zombie movie.
well, so so the problem with that is when suddenly that society or our agencies, our three-letter agencies, come out and completely change the way they do things. Hello, warp speed.
right.
Right? And so, and then if you're so confident in it, and I'm just asking the question,
Right.
if you're so confident in it's okay to do it that way, then what occurs to me is that why do you need to be indemnified from any potential risk factors and just roll it out on the public?
Right.
And so, that's just a question.
Yeah, big red flag there when you're like, oh, we're going to make this, we're going to break all our previous rules, we're going to make it, and you have to take it, and you can't sue us if anything happens.
And if you want to know in it, you got to wait 50 years or to 2050
yeah, exactly.
or whatever.
We won't release the
right?
information for 50 or 75 years on this.
So
it's like red flags.
Right.
That brings up another point, and that is that, since COVID-19, the erosion of public trust with our three-letter agency is a real thing.
Oh, absolutely. There are people who will just, everything in their mind, everything that comes out of their mouth is a lie. Well, if you look back to 2020 and you look back during that time and post 2020, it was changing constantly. They would say one thing, and a month later they were saying another thing, and then down the road they were saying another thing, and none of them matched up to each other.
Right.
And with no real plausible explanation as to why all of a sudden there was a change.
And then to know that our doctors are beholden to those three-letter agencies, and so they can pretty much, and we talked about this before, to where the doctors are like, am I just going to throw my career away because I disagree with them?
Right.
Or am I going to do like, my Hippocratic oath, and I'm going to, protect my patient?
Right.
But I'm going to give you my best opinion. And of course, there are cases out there of people that have suffered greatly as a result of going against the grain,
Yeah, you see, our loss in trust of these organizations whenever you see somebody that messed up or was wrong on this issue, yet they're promoted at the end of everything to a higher position. And it's like, what's going on here? Like Jeff Zients, the former Biden chief of staff, he got promoted to that position after he did the COVID coordination plan in his administration, and it failed miserably. Yet he goes from that position, from COVID coordinator, to White House chief of staff, and it's like, that's when people start losing trust.
Right. Well,
politics as usual.
Right. Well, that's what I say. When you have a bureaucrat, for lack of a better word, but you have an appointed person who's been in a seat for 30 or 40 years, making more money than the president of the United States, it seems to be untouchable or held to no account. But it's.
Are we allowed to say the F word? Fauci.
Oh, you did it now.
You did it now. You're going
We're
to
gonna
get
have to
flagged
bleep
on
that
one.
out.
Ding,
over
ding,
there,
ding, ding,
Melly.
ding. But now listen, here's the thing, but it's true, that trust
Has been eroded.
eroded because, I mean,
Right.
if I hear a statement from any 3 or 4 letter agency that's attached to the government, I'll be honest with you, I stop and I pause
Right.
and I say, okay,
I need the facts.
I want to know more.
I want to know more. I'm not
And-
going to jump to conclusions, but I have a sneaky suspicion.
Well, or I don't trust it readily, And we were talking about this. I mean, how long this has been going on as far as these search, and I told you there's not a lot of transparency laws around the animal trials, right?
Right.
But what this article on organic preppers is that
Before you go into that, I just want to make a statement that
Uh-huh.
we have moved on from the proponents of the mRNA vaccine to those people who have concerns and criticisms about
Right. Oh, yeah, very
mRNA
much. And-
vaccines in animals. you
right,
know.
this particular writer said they know that the German giants Bayer and BioNTech have been working together to develop mRNA vaccines for veterinary use since 2016. So I mean, even before,
Right. Before COVID-19 rolled out.
and but this person, I mean, they're pretty harsh about it. That they don't, they believe that the industries don't want clarity. They want it murky intentionally.
Right.
That's why they're saying there was such a big pushback on that bill in Missouri, was that they wanted it people not knowing. They wanted people
Right.
in the dark, and that's their opinion. And I mean, you form your own.
And by
based
the
on-
way, in case we didn't cover it, Missouri House Bill 1169 failed. So
yes, it did.
right.
Failed in committee.
Right.
10-4.
10-4.
And so it will not be on this year's agenda out on the floor for that type of stuff. How that's phrased, I don't know. But anyway, it won't be brought up this year for Missouri. So it
I
failed.
see.
And I said there were people on both sides of the aisle that voted against it. So, I mean, it's a lot of pushback. This person, they believe that, it would have given the people the knowledge to make informed decisions. And their thing is, and the pharmaceutical giants, industry lobbyists don't want that. They want things to be vague. They want the general public confused and willing to do whatever the experts tell them. Now, stepping on my own opinion here for a minute, I've felt this way. You talked about doctors being beholden to 3-letter agencies and
Right.
and being worried. Well, they're not just beholden to 3-letter agencies. Big pharma, insurance companies, which is a whole separate thing, and we're not going to go down that road. But
Yeah.
but pharma and industry, they receive a lot of their funding, and these hospitals receive a lot of their funding from these agents, from these corporations, and from these things for trial periods and for different things like that. To where you come out against that stuff against them, well, then you could lose millions of dollars in funding.
Sure.
So it affects things, and
Yeah.
there's hundreds of millions of dollars even in the veterinary, the animal world. I mean, hundreds of millions of dollars in grants and funding that's being put out to these companies to research this.
So what you bring up there, if I can compare and contrast just a little bit. Now, if you're a proponent for it, I can certainly say, yeah, pharmaceutical companies and several other big companies,
do good. There's
those
some good.
industry, there is a money motive,
Right.
for the decisions that they make for their, I hate to say this out loud, stakeholders.
Right.
But
Yeah.
they not
Versus-
shareholders,
right.
right? But on the side of those people who are against mRNA vaccines in animals, is there any what's their motive? What's their motivation? Any thoughts about that?
As far as the ones who are against it,
Yeah, the ones that are against it. Do you have any big companies that are pushing back, and funding, the people who are against mRNA vaccines in the food supply?
I don't hear about it, but
I haven't seen any. I
I'm saying
didn't
it
know if
ain't
you'd
out
heard
there.
it. Right.
I haven't found it.
But it's a good question, right?
Right.
I mean, like, what are people motivated by?
Right. Well, you usually see motivation whenever you start to look in the dark shadows the dark shadow realm of corporatism, and how one washes the other's back, and the trade-off that they start receiving, and I mean it always ends with money and power, right?
Right.
They always say follow the money, right?
Right, follow the money.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Well, I mean,
I mean, I'm not saying that profit is a bad thing. That's what capitalism is built upon. And, if
Right.
a company is doing what they're supposed to be doing, is providing a valuable commodity to the buyer,
right.
they deserve a profit. But when these
Sure.
corporations get in bed with government agencies who have an agenda, and money starts changing hands in the shadow realm, so to speak, then that's when you see legislation and rules, kind of turn to the dark side.
Right.
And that's
Right.
that's what people are scared of.
okay.
And I, like I said, I'm which side of the fence, do you fall on? Because I think there's important things that we can do, to make sure that our food is safe. There is things that we need to do to,
Right.
consume it. But this writer says something, and I kind of can't disagree with it on my own viewpoint. Is what we'll hear is we've been researching mRNA for decades, but what we haven't been doing is ingesting these products for decades.
Right.
So we don't know what the effect
Right. What's
is.
the long-term effect?
What's the long term?
Right.
What's the long term? So is it enough to be confident in their safety? Or should it be enough to make you go question it? I mean, that's
Right. So let me just do a little fun thing here real quick.
sure.
And I was out on Chat GPT earlier today, just doing a little bit of research,
Right.
to just see what, artificial intelligence would say, which is a whole new scary thing we're going down. But yeah, I'm out on it because I want to know what it's all about, and I'm asking questions. And let me just say this: I can see that there is more than a slight bias, shall we say?
Right.
And one of the questions that I had asked it is there any evidence that the three-letter agencies were politically swayed by profiteering or receiving or had received political pressure to
Right.
control the population? And what it said to me is there is no evidence to suggest that trusted sources such as CDC and the WHO are swayed by political financial interest, or that they receive pressure to control the population. These organizations are independent and are dedicated to promoting public health and preventing disease, regardless of the political or financial interest. First of all, I want anybody who absolutely believes that money does not sway or power does not sway people, I want those people to go as Jordan Peterson says, go think about that for like a year, buddy.
Yeah.
You need to think about that.
Well,
But anyway, I'm not arguing with it. I'm just wanting to know what it says. And it says, however, it is important to recognize that the public health decision, including that related to vaccines, can sometimes be influenced by a variety of factors, including politics, economic, and social considerations. Okay. So I thought you just said it didn't happen.
That sounded like ESG.
No, I don't know anything about that.
I don't know.
You with the F word and you with the ESG word.
I'll tell you.
All right. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, some decisions related to the vaccine distribution and prioritization have been influenced by factors such as social justice, and equity considerations. So I turn around and asked it another question.
Right.
I'm like, I'm going to dig, and I am going to ask another question here. How many issues related to COVID-19 and mRNA vaccines that was initially labeled conspiracy theories have turned out to be true? So, let's see. What did ChatGPT say? While there have been many conspiracy theories related to COVID-19 and mRNA vaccines, most of them lack credible evidence and have been debunked by scientific research and public health authorities. However, boy, don't you like that when they start with however, there have been some instances where concerns raised by people have led to further investigation and changes in the public health policies, okay? So, no fault of the three-letter agencies. For example, it says,
Okay.
there were concerns initially raised by some people about the safety of AstraZeneca vaccine and its potential link to blood clots. These concerns were initially labeled as conspiracy theories, but further investigation found that there was a small risk of blood clots associated with the vaccine. As a result, some countries suspended the use of AstraZeneca vaccine and updated their guidance on vaccine administration. Now, it goes on, but I think I made my point there.
Right.
Okay, when you dig a little deeper,
Right. That's
into it, and you ask the right questions. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that's really what we're trying to do here. Is we're just simply trying to get, show both sides of it and ask the right questions. And reasonable people
Right.
won't just accept what the three-letter agencies say on its face.
Right.
They will actually dig into it, especially when we're talking about life and death.
Well, I mean, that's always our goal anyway, across any one of our shows, any one of our
Right.
things that we do is, think for yourself. Don't even take our word for it.
Right on.
Right.
Yeah.
Free think. Go out and look. Go out and, look for yourself. Seek that information because, I mean, we could be wrong, and we certainly, even though we try not to, we certainly have our own biases because, I mean, we have our opinions.
When you were talking about, what was labeled conspiracy theories early on, and it's like every question that was asked or evidence that was presented early on in COVID was labeled a conspiracy.
That's
When people was saying, COVID's mortality rate's not very high, everybody was like, oh, that's a conspiracy. It's really high. And it turns out that it's not
Right.
super
Be
deadly
careful,
like they said.
unless you can back that up with some facts there, buddy.
Well, I mean, the world knows now its
Right.
mortality rate. It's that's
Was lower because of different
significantly
factors,
lower.
right?
Another one was that when the vaccines come out and there was evidence that they don't really work that well, right? And anybody that said, hey, these aren't really working was labeled a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
And then when we seen a jump in sudden death after the
Right.
mass vaccines went out,
Right.
that was another conspiracy that's been
Right.
shown after a while that no, there is a huge jump in sudden death syndrome.
Right. Let me just for giggles, since you brought that up, just for fun, let's go back to ChatGPT because I followed it up with another question.
Okay.
All right. I said, is it good policy to label anyone or group as a conspiracy theorist just because they have a different opinion? Okay, remember, this is all still related to what I was just talking about.
Right, of course.
Said, it is not a good policy to label anyone or group as conspiracy theorists simply because they hold a different opinion or perspective. Labeling someone as a conspiracy theorist can be a form of hominem attack that seeks to discredit their opinions or arguments without engaging with them on the merits. Hey, suddenly we're in line.
Right. Suddenly we agree.
Okay.
Because, I mean, let's think back to 2020, 2021. I mean, that time frame. I mean, if you came out with any type of idea or treatment or anything that was against what the three-letter agencies and Mr. F and all of them were coming out, I mean, the media attacked you, they attacked you. It was like, and it was all this craziness. And I mean, it was like, why? Because they disagreed. And I mean, we talked about follow the money, and we talked about motives, earlier about agencies, being persuaded. When you really get down to digging, I think it was the NIH and Mr. F's agencies and all that stuff. They were part of the patent holders on all of this stuff.
Right.
So who was benefiting?
Right.
I did see the patents
Right.
where in the end, I think it was in December 2019.
Right.
You can double check me on this, but in 2019, the U.S. government held patents with some of the pharmaceutical companies
Right.
on the mRNA
Technology. And all that stuff.
Right.
And it's like, wait a minute, how does this, thing? And I wish I could, matter of fact, I'm going to find it while I'm sitting here talking about it.
Sure.
Recent stuff has come out that, about the whole, funding of gain of function, with all that stuff during that time.
Right.
It's like more and more layers as time gets away from it. We find out that, is actually being proven to be true. That was considered a conspiracy theory, and it was lies, and it was
a lot of things, that
right.
actually did. Actually, ChatGPT gave me a couple of instances here, but to where that happened. But I know that there's a whole lot more, and if I was to dig in with the right questions, I'm sure that it would eventually,
Yeah, when you start following the money, you see these the onion start to be
the layers.
the layers start to peel away. Like
Sure.
Bill Gates and Pfizer is an example.
Right. There you
where
go.
in 2019, Bill
You
Gates
are definitely a bona fide conspiracy theorist because you said Bill Gates.
Right.
No kidding, right?
Right. Well, Bill Gates was labeling people
can't.
like us in 2019 and 2020 as conspiracy theorists when we were like, hey, follow the money. You invested, $50 million into Pfizer and in 2019, and then you cashed out in 2021 and made $500 million on that deal.
Hey,
And
I'm
he
not
was-
against people making money now. Come on.
He was pushing non-vaxxers as conspiracy theorists and pushing his vaccines. And then after he cashed out, now his tone has changed. Now it's not. Now he admits that the efficacy of the vaccines wasn't what they were saying it was, and that
Right.
that the vaccines actually don't stop.
Right. Right.
Right.
Now, I'm not,
That's
you
for
may
Bill
think
Gates.
that, that we're a proponent of one or the other, or we're trying to push that. Our intent is to stay, kind of fair and balanced, to borrow that phrase.
Right.
But at the end of the day, what we want to do is for you to make up your own mind about these things. We're just going to present it to you, and
Right.
and and you make up your own mind. However, there is something right now that, regardless of which side
Right.
that you fall on, that we can do.
Right.
And it's what our show has basically been themed around, besides food security, and we take back control over our food supply. The answer to this, regardless of which way you believe,
Right.
is to shop locally.
Right. Get to know the people who grow, produce, and sell
Right.
locally. There's 2 or 3 different ways that happens, particularly with beef. Is either they raise the cattle and it goes to a USDA inspected facility and gets the label, gets processed through that, and then they can resell it because it's met those guidelines. Or you can basically, what you want to call crowdfund or whatever, but you can split the cost of a whole cow directly with a farmer. They'll send it to the processor, who will process it the way you want it,
Right.
and it goes into your freezer, and it never has to go through all of that stuff because you know
Right.
the grower, and you know the processor.
Right, and you can talk to them and they can tell you,
yeah.
you know, from the dirt that the grass is grown on all the way through the entire process, because they're the one that's handling every step of that.
Oh yeah, and you know, and hopefully in a future episode we get to dig into it. But a local rancher that I know and I spoke to, one day we were having a conversation about grass. He was on the phone with his feed supply, his fertilizer person, about a particular type of grass they were going to try and what fertilizer was going to work and all this stuff. And it was because the grass they had, the cow could only eat it down so far because the nutritional value. Whereas this new stuff was going to allow the cow to eat it even further and get more out of the grass. So I mean, they really put a lot of science and a lot of thought into the soil, into the food, what their cow's eating, so that they can grow a better product. You know, and I mean, so it matters to them.
I'll tell you, that brings up another topic, and that is in the mind of that cattle producer, risk versus reward.
Absolutely. You know,
So,
you know, there's a lot of them that are just not willing to take that risk on an unproven anything. When, you know, if a cattleman raises his own cows, I mean, he breeds them, he raises them, they're right there. There's not a lot of outside cattle coming on that farm.
Right.
Whereas, you know, some buy them from sale barns, and it could have come from different places, just depending on their process and how they do it. But yeah, they're in it. I mean, you know, they're raising food, and that matters. But they're in it to make profit. They're in it to make money, and they don't want to turn out a bad product because that could destroy them. So I mean, it matters to them probably more than to most, because they're there from day one. But yeah, it's definitely risk versus reward. You know, if I try this, if I put this thing in my animal and it kills off my herd or it makes my herd sick, you know, what was the benefit? Well, if there's even a question about whether it will or won't, most of them won't use it.
Right, and don't forget the consumer side of that.
Right.
Is that like if people find out what you're putting in there that they may question, you know, then maybe you'll get a black eye in the market. You know?
Well, yeah, that's, you know, there was when I was working in the cattle industry, there was as at a sale barn, you know, and there was a person who had brought cattle up, and his reputation was so good at the auctioneer. Say, hey, here it comes from this guy's ranch. It's, you know, it's time for his stuff, and the buyers were ready to go,
just hopping,
because he had a reputation of raising good cattle, you know, that was going to go to market well. And so, I mean, you know, yeah, it matters to them. You know.
Right. So risk versus reward. I heard some say, you know, look, we've been doing this, you know, for
decades,
basically thousands of years. I mean, as far as cattle and, and humans.
Well, in this country, 150 years later, you know.
And now suddenly we're going to say that, you know, we're going to vaccinate with mRNA because we're concerned about this RSV that's in these cattle. And they're saying, hey, you're going to profit from this. It's going to, you know, less cattle are going to die, you know. And this particular rancher, I think and I'm not promoting good ranchers. I'm sure that they're great people, and I like, you know, I've not tried their products, but I think it was that guy, the guy who owns it, was talking about that it's just not worth it to them to get down into the mRNA stuff. That, you know, it was a risk versus reward thing for them.
Well, there was a guy who put a TikTok and, you know, on Twitter kind of thing. He was a cattle rancher, and that was his thing. He just literally said, listen, you know, he said, I raise my cows here. He said, they don't get sick. We don't lose cows. They don't, you know, we take care of our stuff here. We don't have this problem. So it's not worth it to me to risk that when I'm not having a problem.
Right.
You know,
exactly. So risk versus reward.
Right.
You know, which is most people who are in business, that's what they're going to say.
Oh, absolutely.
So why is there a big push? You know, you would ask that question, but you know, that's up to, you know, the listeners to. Well, you know, I said
money. You know, at the end of the day, follow the money. But yeah.
Right. So anyway, again, ladies and gentlemen, it is up to you to decide, you know, where you want, you know, to buy your products. It's up to you to decide whether the vaccine is a good thing or a bad thing. And like we said, either way it goes, the best policy in our minds is that you develop a relationship with a local producer.
Right. Absolutely.
And that way you know where your product's coming from, either way. And with that being said,
Right.
I've got some information. We've got some exciting news.
We do. We got some really good stuff coming up here. I'm going to get it pulled up so I don't misquote. The Farm2Table Direct Show is going on the road. Coming up, let me get this zoomed up here where I can get it. June 2nd and 3rd, we are going to be at the Okie Homesteading Expo in Pryor, Oklahoma.
Right.
That's going to be a 2-day event. It's a Friday, Saturday. It's in Pryor, Oklahoma at the Mays County Fairground from 8 to 5. Both of those days, and there's going to be tons of your favorite YouTubers. There's going to be a lot of local homesteaders. There's going to be demonstration events, public speaking. There's also going to be concessions. It's a good time. Apparently, this is year number 2. Last year, over 3,000 people showed up for this,
and that made them
go for
2 days now, as opposed to what it did
and there's
last year.
also some workshops that happen prior to those 2 days if people want to get involved with that. But guys like Doug and Stacy from Off Grid with Doug and Stacy are going to be there. There's some of them. Sweet Stingers Honey and Apiary, they're going to be there. Let's see, Gardening with Leon. Leon's going to be there.
Wow.
Let's see, it's hosted by Keep It Dutch and Hidden Heights Farm. They're the ones who put this
Shout
together.
out to them.
Absolutely, they're awesome. Been great dealing with them. The MCs are Arms Family Homesteads. You can check them out. I know I follow them. I like to watch a lot of their content. There's many more. If you'll go to okiehomesteading.com, you can find more information about the workshop, what schedule, and even the schedule for Friday and Saturday of which person's going to be speaking or what demonstrations happening at what time.
I'll try to put that up so that they can see that schedule.
But they said demonstrations, food truck vendors, live music, family friendly. So, first weekend in June coming up. We're going to be there. Hopefully, we're going to get a chance to meet some of our people that we like to watch, and but also
looking forward to it. Maybe grab a few interviews.
Grab a few interviews, bring something back for the people that listen. But it's going to be a good time. I think. Like I said, it's June 2nd and 3rd, Pryor, Oklahoma.
How much are the tickets?
$25 per person per day.
$25 per person per day. Right. So you guys don't need to miss out on that. So we're really looking forward to it. And oh, by the way, they're not sponsoring us. We're one of their sponsors.
Right, exactly.
Okay?
They're not paying us.
And we're paying full price for our tickets for all of our team to be there.
Right.
And we look forward to seeing you out there.
Absolutely.
And I guess we ought to get this thing kind of wrapped up.
I think so. Folks, at the end of the day, we gave you a lot of good information today. And, looking back on this whole debate over the mRNA vaccines, not only in, of course, animals are our primary thing, our food supply, but, we even dabbled off in the human aspect of that, and who's behind it, the money, that type of thing, and definitely opposition and favoritism depending on which side of the fence somebody falls on. But it was we had a lot of interesting conversation as we dug into it, and we hope we were able to bring some of that to you. And at the end of the day, you got to make a decision for yourself, get informed, think for yourself, and until next time, as we always say, prepare for the unexpected and keep it local.
No humans were harmed in the production of this podcast.